First, Kathy Griffin faces major fallout over her vicious and vile photo shoot with a severed head that looks like the president. Very sick. And that is tonight's opening monologue. All right, the so-called tolerant left, well, they're taking its unhinged hatred of the president now to a brand new low. Kathy Griffin is only the latest offender. Now, the so-called comedian is now facing an intense backlash for a very disturbing photo shoot. We have to warn you, what we're about to show you is graphic. Now, here's Griffin posting with a bloody, severed head. It is supposed to be President Trump. Now, Griffin apparently thought that that's funny, but then quickly apologized after realizing that her actions were completely inappropriate, and by the way, more than crossed a line, and some even suggesting maybe legal issues are in play. Earlier today, CNN announced that it has canceled its agreement with Griffin to co-host the network's New Year's Eve coverage with Anderson Cooper, and President Trump and the First Lady, they responded to this awful attempt at humor by attacking the president. The president tweeted, quote, "Kathy Griffin should be ashamed of herself. My children, especially my 11-year-old son, Barron, are having a very hard time with this. Sick." The First Lady, Melania Trump, put out a statement reading, quote, "As a mother, a wife, a human being, this photo is very disturbing when you consider some of the atrocities that are happening in the world today." Now, a photo opportunity like this is simply wrong. It makes you wonder about the mental health of the person who would do this. Now, what's most disturbing about all of this is reaction from the president and the First Lady's 11-year-old son, Barron. Now, according to TMZ, well, Barron Trump was actually watching television when he first saw this disgusting image and thought it was real of his father. Now, to be fair, some in the media, they did realize that what Kathy Griffin did here was wrong, and some spoke out against it, because these types of attacks against the president, it is so disgusting and despicable. It has no place. But, of course, still plenty of others, well, they tried to defend it and laugh it off and even mock the idea that people would be upset about this. For example, look at the headline from Mediaite, "Not worth doing." Oh, Morning Joe laughs off Kathy Griffin's story before moving on to the covfefe analysis. And here's the clip.
I missed the Kathy Griffin news last night.
Okay, you're not talking about it. You missed nothing.
Okay.
Michael, you
sorry,
can't eat,
it's too
though.
gross.
To be fair, you
It's
should
just
eat.
not worth
Yeah,
doing.
you're proud.
Now, Joe and these other people, they're just despicable. They're pathetic. And it's exactly what you would expect from MSNBC, where it's all tinfoil hat conspiracy all the time. And then there's CNN. Take a look at this headline. Molly Ball can't care. Trump family just playing victim with beheading photo. And here's the video.
I have a hard time bringing myself to care about something like this. I think it just speaks to the need to see themselves as a victim that they have, that they're constantly being persecuted. It's constantly...
The Trumps you're talking about.
The Trump people are constantly having to point to the elites who are looking down on them. Of course, like, comedians and celebrities say dumb stuff and do dumb stuff, and violence is not appropriate, but I just don't think that that's the source of President Trump's problems.
Really, an ISIS-like holding up a severed head and an 11-year-old kid seeing it? And then there's Senator Compassion himself, Al Franken. Well, he said, okay, Griffin crossed the line and made a horrible mistake, but he accepts apologies. And he's still standing by her. Look at this headline. Senator Franken still plans to appear with Kathy Griffin after outcry over photo shoot. And listen to what he said.
Can she recover from this?
Well, I think she did the right thing. I think asking for forgiveness and acknowledging that this is a horrible mistake, and so I think she can.
And you're still going to appear with her?
Yes.
Yeah, he accepts apologies, except if you're a conservative like Rush Limbaugh. Here's my take on this, and there's a deeper story going on. This latest despicable display, in this case Kathy Griffin, it's only the latest example in a long list of attacks that the left has launched against the president, and specifically against members of his family, his wife, his daughter, his 11-year-old son. Now, as we often show you, liberals and the Destroy Trump media viciously wake up, go after President Trump day after day, night after night, pushing all of their bizarre conspiracy theories, launching all kinds of vile personal attacks. But it goes much deeper than that. The left knows no boundaries when it comes to the president's family. Now, they've gone after the First Lady, Melania Trump. They've gone after all the children, Ivanka, Don Jr., Eric, Tiffany, and their spouses, and, of course, the president's 11-year-old son, Barron. And you can criticize the president, frankly, all you want. Fair game, although some of it has been sick and obsessive and bizarrely, breathlessly, conspiratorial. But really, an 11-year-old kid, does this not expose a massive double standard when it comes to the left? 9 times out of 10, they can cross the line, and they don't face any consequences. There's no outrage. There's no backlash. Conservatives don't say they need to be fired and boycotted. They're allowed to do and say whatever they want, whenever they want, especially when it comes to smearing and attacking conservatives, which is probably why Kathy Griffin thought it was okay to do that in the first place. Now, coming up later tonight, we're going to have much more on this effort to call out the double standard and the attacks against me and the boycotts against me and the efforts to silence conservatives and liberal fascism, and Brian Maloney and Melanie Morgan, who created the Media Equality Project to fight back against these efforts to silence conservative voices. They will be here to explain that they're just getting started. They're giving a preview of what's coming in the weeks ahead. But first, let me show you just a couple examples of what I'm talking about. NBC is supposed to be a news organization, NBC News, with Tom Brokaw and Brian Williams, etc., right? Remember all of that? On Chancellor. Well, NBC's Rachel Maddow, one of the worst offenders when it comes to pushing. As a matter of fact, she is the champion of pushing unhinged, bizarre conspiracy theories. Now, here's her back in 2010 trying to explain away then Congressman Anthony Weiner's graphic, lewd tweet, making excuses for little Anthony.
If the congressman was hacked, as he said he was, if he was pranked, how would that work? How could a person do that? What would that look like? The Daily Kos writer looks at the image of the congressman's Twitter account more closely, and judging from the pixelization of the images and some other visual clues, he concludes that the damage was a composite, saved a number of times, indicating it had been photoshopped. For a theory with fewer steps, a number of other blogs have different versions of a theory of a potential hacking that looks at the information embedded in this controversial picture. A third, but by no means final theory, has to do with the photo sharing service that I was talking about earlier, YFrog. It's not all that hard to generate a program that would try every possible combination using your Twitter name until you got the right email address to use this service to post pictures.
NBC News. And, of course, there was also the time that Maddow theorized that Republicans may be pushing assassinations in an actual political tactic that they're using. Really? Watch this.
Has enough kerosene been poured on the flames that the possibility of violence, even assassination, is being posited as a real political tactic in the United States?
Now, as we were able to show you last night, these examples is barely scratching the surface when it comes to the crazy, insane, conspiratorial things that have been said over at NBC News and Rachel Maddow's program. And also tonight, failed Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. She continues to lead the way in pushing these conspiracy theories about why she lost the election. Earlier today, during an interview at a tech conference, she gave a very long list of excuses, blaming everybody but herself. Watch this.
The use of my email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. This was the biggest nothing burger ever. It was a mistake. I've said it was a mistake. I know you had Dean Baquet here from the New York Times yesterday, and they covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. The Russians, in my opinion, and based on the intel and counter-intel people I've talked to, could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.
Guided by Americans and guided by people who had polling and data information. Is that? I never said I was a perfect candidate, and I certainly have never said I ran perfect campaigns, but I don't know who is or did. Mm-hmm. And at some point, it sort of bleeds over into misogyny.
By the way, 5 foreign intelligence agencies got a hold of top secret information and special access program information because she had a computer server that she shouldn't have had in a mom and pop shop bathroom closet. And Hillary, there's no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And we can't forget that Hillary's been pushing other bizarre conspiracy theories for years. Remember, she blamed all of her husband's problems on the vast right-wing conspiracy. All right, here to react to all of this, the editor-in-chief of LifeSet, Fox News contributor, nationally syndicated talk show host, radio talk show host, Laura Ingraham. All right, let's first start with, I want to ask a legal question, because I had a couple of friends of mine that are lawyers. If you have a picture of a president's severed head, like you're an ISIS fighter, and you just beheaded him, could that be interpreted as a threat against the president?
In theory, I guess, but in practice, no. And I think the reason not is that you would try to discern the intent of what Kathy Griffin was trying to do, and she was intending to get publicity for herself, which she's certainly gotten. She's intended to raise her profile and be outrageous, and she said funny, although nothing about it is funny. So I think that's a stretch. I mean, you could really stretch it and say, well, the image itself, in the photo shoot itself, was meant to incite further violence. But again, as a legal matter, I think that would be pretty difficult to prove. It doesn't take anything away from the fact that it is hideous and depraved and a degenerate approach to entertainment, and meant to shock and also meant to dehumanize. Sean, I think a lot of what Hollywood does to conservatives is the opposite of real engaged debate. There's no debate. There's no substantive back and forth, because they usually lose that. But they want to dehumanize him. So he's not even entitled to the basic respect of the presidency. He's subhuman in their eyes. And she was carrying that understanding out in that bizarre and disgusting photo shoot.
All right, so TMZ reports that Barron Trump saw this. Any 11-year-old kid is going to be upset by it. But the left's silence, I mean, they claim that they have a monopoly of compassion on gays, lesbians, women's rights, and they always accuse Republicans of being racist and sexist. How do they stay silent when the First Lady has been attacked, as she has, Ivanka as she has? By the way, you and Kellyanne, as you have both been. Lara Trump was going to join us later. How do they justify never standing up for you guys, or never standing up for my right to free speech, when they're the champions of free speech?
Well, because they're not true feminists. I mean, they cloak themselves in the feminist garb, but in reality, they're just either socialists, leftists, Marxists. And their goal is just to grow the government. They don't trust the people. The individual people who turned out in droves in Michigan and Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania to vote for Trump, they're subhuman too. I mean, they really aren't either entitled to determine their own destiny, their own understanding of marriage, their own understanding of when life begins. The very fact that they voted for Trump, in the eyes of a lot of these people from the entertainment industry and certainly from far left politics, their very existence is a point of embarrassment. So rather than engage people on a real conversation, they seek to perpetually and merely dehumanize them and debase them to the extent that you don't even have to treat them as human beings. And that goes for the sons and daughters of Donald Trump. Suddenly, the left cares about the poor transgender kid who can't use the bathroom that he or she wants to use. Okay, that's their point. But the child of a conservative who's treated this way, they don't even deserve that.
You know what the great... If any conservative had attacked Malia and Sasha that way, and God forbid they ever would... Never work again. And that also gets to, or if any conservative woman that was running for president took money from Sharia countries that abuse women, gays, lesbians, Christians, and Jews, and they claim that they have the monopoly of compassion for these groups. Same with freedom of speech. You and I have watched.
Yeah.
We have watched a lot of our colleagues, Alinsky-like tactics, isolated, targeted, and hurt by so-called free speech liberals.
You know what I will say, though, Sean, on this, though? You know what I'll say? It's going back to 2002 when Harry Belafonte was going after Colin Powell as the house slave, and all the horrible things they said about Condi Rice. And it goes on and on and on. What they said about Rush Limbaugh, remember the Chris Matthews line about that? I don't think that's gotten them very far. I really don't. I think most reasonable people see these tactics as tactics of utter desperation.
Hey, Laura, conservatives gotten fired because of conservatives have gotten fired, and shows have been damaged significantly because of these organized attacks because they don't like what people say.
Conservatives have to do the same thing in response. We can sit around and whine and moan about how unfair this is, and it is. It's gross. It's awful. But until people start standing up and say, you know something, I don't tolerate what you're doing. I don't agree with it. And I'm actually not going to buy your products. I'm not going to support, your economic partners or your business partners. I'm not going to do it. Money does talk at some point.
All right, Laura Ingraham, as always, thank you for being with us. And speaking of fighting fire with fire and stopping the conservative scalping and liberal fascism, when we come back, Brian Maloney, Melanie Morgan, they're co-founders of the Media Equality Project, say that they're only warming up fighting back. And they'll explain what they're planning to do next to stand up for conservatives' rights not to be attacked by liberal fascists. That, and also CNN continues with non-stop anti-Trump coverage. Now, later tonight, you're going to see the lowlights from just the past few weeks of this hard-hitting Clinton News Network. Monica Crowley, Geraldo Rivera join us, and the president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, will check in and give us the family's reaction to Kathy Griffin's crude, despicable, sick picture. Straight ahead.
I no longer live with the uncertainties of Hep C, wondering, what if? I let go of all those feelings because I am.
Feel cool, dry, and refreshingly confident. Anytime, anywhere. Stay cool, America.
Welcome back to Hannity. So last night we told you about a brand new campaign started by Melanie Morgan and Brian Maloney. Now they founded the Media Equality Project, which aims to stop left-wing attacks to silence conservative voices. They say it's time to, quote, stop the scalpings. Now today Brian Maloney published an article entitled Coming Attractions, Media Equality Project is just warming up. The article goes on to say, quote, for the Media Equality Project, Rachel Maddow is only the beginning of our effort to expose the media's huge double standard. Coming up next, Morning Joe, Brian Stelter, Steve Colbert, Mike Smerconish, Don Lemon, Lawrence O'Donnell, Anderson Cooper, George Stephanopoulos, and much more. And back with us tonight, the founders of the Media Equality Project, Melanie Morgan and Brian Maloney. Guys, good to see you both. And you have this website. I've heard you got millions and millions of people now that have engaged in this effort. And this is not a boycott. This is an effort that all these efforts by the left to isolate, target, and silence conservatives, you're saying enough is enough. Explain what you're doing.
Hey, well, we call it two can play at this game, as a matter of fact, because that's exactly what's happening. Is Media Matters for America, which is a left-wing advocacy group, has been involved in this tit-for-tat game where they've been targeting your advertisers, and they've done it to other talk show hosts. And it's just time for conservatives to get up their guts and say, we're not going to take this anymore. And that's what we've done is we've organized a grassroots organization. And as you said, Sean, we have had millions of people who have tweeted and retweeted. More than 4 million people who've been involved in this campaign, and hundreds of thousands who are checking out our website and our Facebook. It's gone crazy, and it's the one reason and one reason only. We are sick and tired of being the butt end of a joke by liberals. We're fighting back now.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, as I pointed out in the last segment, I mean, look, I've always been a believer in free speech. I've always resisted boycotts. This isn't a boycott. And what you're saying is, okay, if you guys are going to use these tactics as a means of silencing conservative voices, well, it's going to be used against you. I'll be honest, I was kind of shocked when I saw the bizarre, unhinged, the champion of conspiracy theories, Rachel Maddow. But you also have, for example, what happened with Kathy Griffin today. And then you have, somebody like Steve Colbert. Remember, this is what Steve Colbert had said.
John Dickerson has way too much dignity to trade insults with the President of the United States to his face. But I, sir, am no John Dickerson. Mr. Trump, your presidency, I love your presidency. I call it disgrace the nation. You attract more skinheads than free Rogaine. You have more people people marching against you than cancer. You talk like a sign language gorilla who got hit in the head.
All right, it's all in the name of comedy, but it wasn't funny, and they use words that nobody would use, like Bill Maher wants to be funny, and he makes incest jokes about the President of the United States and his daughter, or what Barron Trump, then a 10-year-old, now 11, has had to endure, what Melania Trump has had to endure, Brian.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Sean, it's no coincidence that that Kathy Griffin felt that she was in a place to do something like pulling a stunt like that, because the environment is there. I mean, as far as she knew, it would have been fine, because that's how everyone's been talking and behaving. And then now I have to explain to my 9-year-old daughter why a celebrity is holding up a head. And I'm sure all of our children have seen this at least 5 times since yesterday. What are we supposed to tell our kids?
Well, I mean, the saddest story that I read, and it was a TMZ report, Harvey Levin's site, that, in fact, Barron Trump had seen this. All right, so you put up on your site preview of coming attractions, Melanie, and you listed all of these people that I mentioned. What does that mean?
That means that we're going to give them a taste of their own medicine. These are people who have said the most outrageous, stupid, conspiracy-oriented things, and they blamed the right wing for everything from a Russian conspiracy to, I don't know. I mean, it just keeps, the list keeps going on and on. But some of these people are downright dangerous and weird with their comments. It's got to stop, Sean. We are real people on the right with real feelings, real families, real careers. You've seen this boycott against you. I have seen this boycott against me. Now, we have to fight back. That's all there is to it. We're going to do it, and we're happy to stand by Sean, and that's you as we go through this process.
Thank you. And I am appreciative and humbled. It's funny because the people that run that site, I've now read so much. They have said the most outrageous things. There's so much information about them, and I suspect maybe at some point you'll be reporting on it. But, Brian, I guess I ask you this last question here. So you're saying to people, if you want to keep conservative voices, because I believe that this is a threat to silence, shut down the Fox News channel, silence and shut down talk radio hosts one by one. They're going to try and pick us all off, and they've been doing this for years. The 2 outlets where you get alternative voices, opinions, and information. Can they be successful, or does this stop it? And you won't stop until they stop it.
Well, I think you're right, Sean, and I think what's happened is over the last 2 weeks, conservatives have realized that it's all on the line here. We may lose our voices forever, that they've become on the left more successful than we ever could have imagined. They've been at it for years. They have millions in Soros funding, and that if we didn't take a stand now, but I'm telling you, Sean, I feel like this week we have truly begun to turn the tables. Conservatives are fighting back, and we're doing that at MediaEqualizer.com and Stop the Scalpings on Facebook and S-Scalpings on Twitter. And we're thrilled to have everyone's support. It has been overwhelming. Melanie and I don't even sleep anymore, but we're thrilled to do it for the cause, because I think this is the point right now. If we lose it now, we'll never get it back, Sean. We'll never get your show back. We'll never get any of the others back.
Guys, thank you. And how do people get in touch with you, Melanie? MediaEqualizer.com.
Stop the Scalpings. Yes. Stop the Scalpings on Facebook. MediaEqualizer.com.
All right. And up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
He's gains weight, according to these sources. He doesn't trust people around him. He's withdrawing. Not a good picture.
CNN now reporting that according to their sources, President Trump is gaining weight. Talk about hard-hitting news. Now, we're going to show you other lowlights from the network's recent coverage. It is so beyond the pale. We'll get reaction from Monica Crowley, Geraldo Rivera, and also tonight, President Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. She responds to the vicious, vile, hateful stunt of Kathy Griffin and how it is impacting her family, and particularly Barron Trump. Straight ahead.
BP developed new industry-leading software to monitor drilling operations in real time, so our engineers can solve problems with the most precise data at their fingertips. Because safety is never being satisfied and always working to be better.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in.
Your brain is an amazing thing, but as you get older, it naturally begins to change, causing a lack of sharpness or even trouble with recall. Thankfully, the breakthrough in Prevagen helps your brain and actually improves memory. The secret is an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, the name to remember.
Good evening, and live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. President Trump tweeting that he will announce whether to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord. That'll be tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Leaving the deal would fulfill a central campaign pledge, but would anger international allies. Under the pact, the U.S. is committed to reduce emissions by 26 to 28% by 2025. 11 American contractors were among hundreds injured in a massive truck bombing in the capital of Afghanistan. The blast also killed 90 people. It happened in Kabul's heavily guarded diplomatic quarter, which houses the U.S. Embassy. And D.C. police say they might have prevented a potential disaster. A Pennsylvania doctor staying at the Trump Hotel was arrested after cops found an assault-style rifle, handgun, and ammunition in his car. The man who had allegedly made threatening remarks is now facing charges for having illegal firearms. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now, back to Hannity.
Welcome back to Hannity. So CNN has now cut all ties with Kathy Griffin over her vicious and vile photo shoot depicting a decapitated President Trump with blood all over him. Now, let's not forget the constant offensive coverage that President Trump receives from fake news CNN on a daily basis, including last night. Look at this headline from Mediaite. Angry, isolated, gaining weight. CNN's Gloria Borger reports on Trump's emotional state. Now watch this.
Home alone, an angry and isolated president hunkers down as the Russia investigation swirls around him. Gloria, you have some incredible reporting, I understand, on President Trump and where his head is at right now following his trip abroad. Lonely and angry?
He sees him emotionally withdrawing because he doesn't really trust a lot of people around him.
He's gained weight, according to these sources. He doesn't trust people around him. He's withdrawing. Not a good picture.
He now lives within himself, which is a dangerous place for him to be.
How do these people live with themselves? Anyway, now, this is only the latest example of the Clinton News Network's deplorable coverage of the president. For example, remember the hard-hitting investigation into Ice Cream Gate? CNN reports Trump gets 2 scoops of ice cream. Everyone else gets 1. Watch this.
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone else around the table gets 1. And no word if there were sprinkles.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
Now, this hard-hitting reporting. Then there was the time the network questioned the president's mental capacity. Actual CNN panel discussion. Is Trump competent enough to be the president? Would they ever do this to Obama? Watch this.
From all we know so far, Trump didn't do it because he's a Russian agent or for any malevolent intent. He did it because he's sloppy, because he lacks all impulse and control, and above all, because he is a 7-year-old boy desperate for the approval of those he admires. This raises an important question this morning. Is Donald Trump competent to be president?
And, of course, there's been a lot of name-calling, including this tirade. Van Jones, Trump is President Snowflake. Remember, he called this a white lash.
When he ran, he was this tough guy. This guy's going to get things done, this great negotiator. He was Trumpzilla. He was going to make Washington, bow down. He was going to drain the swamp. Now he's President Snowflake, okay? Everything he said, oh, they're mean to me and they don't like me and I just don't understand it and it's not fair.
Actually, most of the snowflakes work at CNN and NBC. Then there was this very disgusting commentary, quote, Anderson Cooper to Jeffrey Lord. You defend Trump if he took a dump on his desk. Really, Anderson? Really?
He's the president of the United States. If he wants to say that, Barack Obama wants to say whatever. If George Bush says, I looked in his eyes and thought he was a dump on his desk, you would defend it. Say it.
All right, joining us now, conservative commentator Monica Crowley, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. Look, I covered Obama tough. I was tough, but it was a lot more substantive than this nonsense we see daily. It seems like, I think Newt Gingrich is right. They wake up every morning saying, how are we going to get him today? What are we going to pick on today?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, what the leftist media has done from the moment that Donald Trump emerged as a serious candidate for president, never mind once he became president, was attack him with really serious things like allegations of Russia collusion without any evidence whatsoever, the Kathy Griffin episode, to small things like you pointed out that he takes, oh my goodness, 2 scoops of ice cream every night, the horror. But all of these incidents really reveal a sick pathology on the part of the left with regard to Donald Trump. You know, for decades, Sean, the media has largely been on the left. We know that they've shown a bias against conservatives, Republicans, and in favor of Democrats and liberals. But what's different now is the level of activism and vitriol directed toward this particular president because he represents such an unprecedented threat to the establishment, and that includes the media as well. They know that they have many platforms with which to attack him, and this assault is not going to end until his presidency does. And in their mind, if they can accelerate the end of his presidency, so much the better.
Yeah, and another point, Geraldo, too, Monica's onto something here. At the very least, they think they can hit and punch and distract and distort and stay on offense. At the very least, in their minds, they stop his agenda. And if they stop his agenda, then maybe that puts the House at risk in 2018. Maybe that creates an opportunity for impeachment for God knows no reason at this point at all, but they've been talking about it from day one.
Impeachment is a fantasy. But I just want to give you one more example of how twisted things have become. The president's just returned from this 9-day trip to the Middle East and to Europe. By the time he got to the group shot of the European Union members, and he pushed aside the Montenegrin president in a big photo op because the president of the United States and the 5 big powers traditionally have the front row. So he edged the guy around, the newest member of the EU, the Montenegro president. But for a day and a half, that's what they talked about. Rather than talking about what happened in Saudi Arabia, good or ill, what happened in Israel, good or ill, the Pope visit, how that they were talking about Trump the bull. It was the symbol how this was the personification of the press. It is so stupid where we are right now. And with the press trying to stab this guy in the back, it is so disheartening. It is so unnecessary. And I just think that at some point it becomes really unpatriotic.
All right, we'll give the last 30 seconds, Monica.
And it's so transparent. I mean, in the past, we all knew that they exhibited left-wing bias, but at least they made the pretense of dressing it up or pretending to be somewhat objective, and now they just don't. I mean, the level of activism here is really quite unprecedented because, again, Donald Trump is an unprecedented figure. He must not be allowed to succeed. That's the view of everybody in the establishment, including the media, and that's why they have the long knives that were out for every Republican president are certainly out for Donald Trump, but even more so because he represents something wholly different, that he is going to set this country and the way things are done on a completely different trajectory, and that's why he's got to be destroyed.
All right, guys, good to see you both, and thank you both for your help. It means a lot to me. And coming up, the Trump family viciously attacked by Democrats and members of the destroyed Trump media. The president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is here to speak out with reaction, and how has this impacted the president's 11-year-old son? And then later, President Trump expected to announce he will pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Why is that agreement bad for you and America? Chris Horner will tell you straight ahead.
Constipated? Trust #1 doctor recommended Dulcolax. Use Dulcolax.
And welcome back to Hannity. So Kathy Griffin.
Miracle Ear. Hear a better day.
And welcome back to Hannity. So Kathy Griffin's vicious, vile attempt at so-called humor, not funny, in a recent photo shoot, holding a severed head that looks like President Trump, kind of like an ISIS fighter after holding up a beheaded individual that they just took their head off. Only the latest vicious attack by the left. In fact, the entire Trump family has been subjected to these horrible attacks by Democrats and members of the mainstream media. Donald Trump Jr. last night tweeted this about Kathy Griffin's vile so-called joke, quote, "Disgusting, not surprising. This is the left today. They consider this acceptable. Imagine a conservative that did this to President Obama." Joining us now with reaction, President Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. I think the saddest part of this, Lara, reading and watching this, is the reaction of the president's youngest son, Barron. And do you know that TMZ report, I assume, is true?
I actually haven't talked to them today about this specifically, but, you know, my brother-in-law said it very well. The fact that we live in a society that thinks that something like this is acceptable, and let's not forget, it probably wasn't just Kathy Griffin. She has many people around her. There was a photographer involved. I'm sure she has a publicist that worked with her. There were a lot of people around that could have said, you know what, this crosses the line. And the fact that nobody said that this crossed any line is appalling, but it tells you the society that we live in today and what some people deem acceptable. And this is exactly right. Had this happened to President Obama, I can only imagine what people would be saying right now.
Let's just start with the horrific things that have been said about a then 10, now 11-year-old kid. Leave the kid alone. I mean, it's really vicious. Or what has been said about our First Lady, or what has been said about Ivanka Trump. Now the vicious attacks against Jared. It seems like deep state leaks again. Then you've got Don and Eric. You've been attacked. You're expecting your first child. And everybody else around the president, anybody that likes the president, it seems, is subjected to this. I've never seen it this bad. As a family, have you talked about it, and how are you dealing with all of it?
Well, we've been dealing with it for almost 2 years now, Sean, and I'd love to say that it gets easier. It doesn't get easier, but we can handle it. You know, we've taken it for almost 2 years, and we understand that this is the world we live in, and we've accepted it in a way. But I think what is not acceptable is that people do things like what Kathy Griffin did, that there are people out there that would rather see our president fail rather than see our country succeed. And it's very dangerous, and we live in a very, very dangerous place right now, and it's very frightening to all of us.
You know, I'm watching, in my case, I mean, here you have liberals that claim they're the greatest advocates, champions of freedom of speech. They're not. Here, you know, Ivanka, Melania attacked, you've been attacked, and I have not heard a peep out of any prominent Democrat saying, okay, can we please stop attacking these women because it's so vile and vicious. And, you know, and then you got Hillary, you know, there's such hypocrisy. They're not champions of free speech. They take money from Sharia countries that persecute and abuse women, kill gays and lesbians, persecute Christians and Jews. They buy silence from people like Hillary. And not a peep. I think I'm the only person in the country that points out the hypocrisy. And look at, for example, Ivanka. Look at what the horrible things Bill Maher said about her, and she can't even, like, promote a recent book.
Yeah, and she does have a great book out there for business-minded women, and as a woman who works myself, I have read it, and I think it's going to be very helpful whenever I have a child in September to help me along the way. And she can't promote it. She says she won't promote it, and so I would love for people to go out and read it because it's an incredible book. But what these people have said, Sean, on the left, is they're teaching the young women of this country, who are all paying very close attention right now, that you can support other women, but only if these other women have their interests aligned exactly with yours. And anything outside of that is unacceptable.
Yeah. All right, Lara Trump, I'm sorry that your family has to go through that. All the best. Congratulations on the baby. We wish you the best. Tell Eric I said hi.
Thanks, Sean.
And coming up, President Trump expected to pull out of the Paris climate agreement. So is this the right thing to do? We're going to examine this. We'll do an investigation. Chris Horner's next. Straight ahead.
When you have allergies, it can seem like triggers pop up everywhere. Luckily, there's powerful 24-hour non-drowsy Claritin.
Day, because we made a damn good beer. Yuengling Traditional Lager. Respect. It's earned.
In 2015, then President Obama, along with 195 other countries, signed a climate agreement in Paris. Now, on the campaign trail, then candidate Trump promised to review the deal, and he tweeted today, quote, "I will be announcing my decision on the Paris Accord over the next few days. Make America great again." Joining us now with reaction, senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Chris Horner. Chris, this would be a really bad idea. You have studied this topic more than anybody I know, and you've been an outspoken critic against the hysteria that's preached by Al Gore and the left. Why is this a bad deal?
For many reasons, including some put very well by candidate Donald Trump. We would cede what you could call energy sovereignty or policy making when it comes to energy to others who have their interests at heart but not ours, as candidate Trump said when he promised to cancel U.S. participation. And it's clearly a treaty which President Obama just pretended it isn't, and therefore circumvented the Senate, further weakening our treaty process, which, you know, it had a good run, but I suggest we try to restore it soon. The policies are not popular here. They wouldn't be approved. It's why President Obama went through EPA, and undoing those rules would be much harder if President Trump broke this promise.
How would it impact?
You and I, not quite 20 years ago, talked about the Kyoto Treaty. That had one and contemplated two compliance periods. This goes on forever. It solves that problem. It requires us to impose the energy rationing policies of the Kyoto Treaty, of President Obama's global warming rules, increasing the price, as President Obama put it, causing your electricity rates to necessarily skyrocket because they have to price the most abundant, affordable, reliable energy out of your reach to force stuff that doesn't work, that's failed for 125 years into the system. To, as President Obama said in numerous speeches, finally make renewable energy profitable. This is too great a cost to reward some campaign contributors. And by the way, not Trump campaign contributors. This is about rewarding Clinton supporters. It was a priority for them. So it tightens every 5 years in perpetuity. This is the agreement. It's done. There is no seat at the table. And I hope President Trump's advisors remind him that that lame talking point of Washington Wiseman, well, you have to have a seat at the table, they solved that here. It requires a tightening every 5 years in perpetuity of us. Most countries really don't have an obligation. And it just goes on. You're talking about increasing energy poverty, killing seniors and the most vulnerable for a gesture. There's no detectable climate impact, even projected.
I thought it was all finished. I thought anybody like us, we're just climate deniers. But it went from literally global cooling in the next ice age to global warming, and now they just have broad climate change. And, of course, they even had to, in some instances, we know they manipulated data. All right, Chris Horner, thank you. When we come back, a very important question of the day is straight ahead as we continue.
This Sunday, get ready for the next revolution.
I promise you, we are going to shake things up.
Steve Hilton's been on the front lines of Brexit and a champion of the populist movement.
You've got to get power out of the hand.
1 carat $9.90 and 2 carat $19.90. GIA Diamonds guaranteed the lowest price, plus 1 carat studs just $5.99. The Jewelry Exchange Direct.
Get ready for the next revolution.
I promise you, we are going to shake things up.
Steve Hilton's been a champion of the populist movement. Now, he wants you to join.
This is a time of revolution, and we want to show you what's next.
The Next Revolution, premiering Sunday only on the Fox News Channel.
Welcome back to Hannity. All right, time for our question of the day tonight. Do you think the president should pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement? Absolutely. Go to Facebook.com/Sean Hannity. We want to hear from you. At Sean Hannity on Twitter. Let us know what you think. That's all the time we have left this evening. And if we're lucky, sadly for you liberal snowflakes, if we're lucky, we'll be back here tomorrow night. Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Kathy Griffin has just been bounced at CNN after apologizing for her gruesome Donald Trump beheading video. In a minute, we'll ask whatever happened to comedy and why it's suddenly been replaced by preachy political sermonizing from dumb people, a real concern. But first tonight, Hillary Clinton appears to be making a fashion statement by adopting the left's trendiest new accessory, a tinfoil hat. While taking questions at a tech conference in California today, Clinton dismissed the scandal over her private email server as a non-issue of zero importance.
My email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. This was the biggest nothing burger ever. It was a mistake. I've said it was a mistake. And obviously, if I got to turn the clock back, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. But the way that it was used was very damaging.
It meant nothing. It was totally irrelevant, which does raise the question, if it didn't mean anything, why did it hurt her campaign so much? She had an explanation for that, too. She said because the right-wingers in the media, the Washington Post and the New York Times, wouldn't let it go.
I know you had Dean Baquet here from the New York Times yesterday, and they covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. And then in their endorsement of me, they said, this email thing, it's like a help desk issue. So It was always a hard issue to put to bed, but we put it to bed in July, and then it rose up again.
Okay, so the New York Times is biased against Democrats. A novel defense, you say? Oh, but it got weirder from there, a lot weirder. Hillary went on to deliver a narrative so complex we could barely follow it, but we did. She explained how Donald Trump and Russia teamed up to rob her of her rightful job as President of the United States.
How did they know what messages to deliver? Who told them? Who told them?
Yeah.
Who were they coordinating with or colluding with? There's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites. The Russians, in my opinion, and based on the intel and counter-intel people I've talked to, could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.